Hey, buddy, Jim V here. It is time to talk about spirit guides, angels, celestial beings, all that kind of good stuff. I've talked about this in some columns, and I thought it was time to do a YouTube video on it, expand a little bit on this subject. So, many, many years ago, I actually learned how to read and work with angel cards, and I've been using them for many years in sessions with clients, sometimes in addition to tarot or other oracles that I work with. But let me tell you a little bit of quick history about this, and where this kind of came about and where I got to that, and also how my listeners here can kind of benefit by either working with those cards or connecting with angels and spirit guides in that way. So initially, I worked with numerology, astrology. Eventually, I learned tarot, and then I graduated to runestones, a few other types of oracles that I began to work with and inevitably master. And I didn't want to do the angel thing. I knew the angel cards. I kind of grew up Catholic, so it was sort of like it just kind of seemed a little bit hokey to me in that way. It wasn't against it, but just not something I ever really grasped. And so I had gone through a really painful breakup in early 2000s. And I was in a New Age bookstore, and they had an open deck of angel cards. And I pulled an angel card, and it just floored me. It was exactly what I needed to hear. It's Archangel Uriel. And without getting into detail about that, it really changed my perspective on that. And I bought a deck, and I started working with them. And again, now for 25 years, I've used them for myself and for clients. So what that kind of tuned me into, aside just working with the cards themselves, it was just to begin to focus on the idea that we did have angels and spirit guides in that way, without getting into the mechanics of those realms and what they all mean and all those other things. Whatever your beliefs are about this, it can benefit you to tap into working with your spirit guides and especially with your angels in that way, because it's almost like a separate realm of helpers and guidance. But what I always tell people is, while they may kind of nudge and prompt and give us insight from time to time, we get more of it when we begin to ask for it or focus on it. So, like anything else, you got to kind of practice a little bit more to make that happen. So again, as I began to work with those cards and focus more on it, a couple things started happening for me that were interesting. I pretty much figured out pretty early on that a lot of times angel contact for me was in the form of white feathers. So I would see white feathers, and they're a common thing that you may find anyway, but I'd see them on the ground, or I'd get in my car and there'd be one sitting on my seat. I mean, it's just real interesting things that began to happen. And even to this day, I still kind of like, if I'm ever getting like negative and doubtful in my head, sometimes I'll see a white feather, and that just gets me to be like, all right, positive, ask if you're bothered about something, ask your spirit guides, your angels to help you with this, and they almost always immediately do. Or if anything, at the very least, it changes my perspective. So again, for me, it became feathers, white feathers in particular. So for some people, it could be songs, it could be coins, it could be just messages that are delivered that way. But they're kind of subtle and sometimes not so subtle reminders that you're on tack and that you're in that dock, and they're looking out for you and they're trying to help you. Again, sometimes they're giving you advice and guidance in different formats. We may not like it, but again, just like higher self advice, it's usually going to be pretty much right on, even if we don't agree at the moment because we can't see that larger picture. Okay, so that being said, let me share a really poignant story. Again, I wrote about this some years ago. If you follow my column, my snake oil column, you may have caught this story. I think I called it Angel Stuff, but I want to kind of share it here because it was a really profound example of angel contact that happened for me. And there have been many of them, but this one, probably the biggest of all. So this is probably 15 years or so ago, about 15 years ago. And I was at a party with I was in my 40s at the time, and I was at a party with a lot of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, a lot of families and children running around and kids. And at the time I was single, and while I honestly never really wanted to have kids, I still was kind of, dealing with kind of being alone and being single and having some issues with that. And I was kind of sitting watching all these families and children running around, and I started feeling very almost like despondent in a way about my current situation and wondering if I had made the right choices and feeling kind of alone, and look at all these families and couples and partnerships. And I was kind of sitting there, and my friend's daughter, who at the time was maybe 3 or 4 years old, just she was playing with her friends somewhere in a corner, as with many other kids, and she ran up to me and she handed me a white feather and said, "Uncle Jim, they told me to give you this." And I just, it really pushed me to a very emotional place rather quickly. I thanked her, I grabbed the feather, and it was like a real big awakening. I mean, angels talking to children. And so I've had many types of situations like that happen. So to me, it's very, very valid. And that one's just more of a really kind of blatant, extreme example of it that was really, really hard not to notice. But a lot of times those messages are delivered more subtly. And that's one of the reasons why I like the angel cards, because they kind of verbalize it for you. But just when you learn how to tap into this world, and people say, well, how do you do that? Like anything else, you begin to practice. Like you could ask your angels to help you with parking spots. They're not going to be annoyed that you're taking up their time. They work at many levels. Again, it's in the form of a spirit guide. If you're asking for something that's not good for you, of course, that's not going to happen. They won't have that happen, but they should get the enlightenment as to why that may not be the best thing for you. So really, again, it's kind of an interesting process to go through. It does change your viewpoint in the world for just many, many beneficial ways. People are probably going to think you're a little crazy and cuckoo if you share it. Who cares? There's just many benefits to it. So I highly recommend that. And I'll put some information in the comment section about how you can access having your own personal angel reading session with me as well. So happy spirit guide, angel communication, and until next time, cheers.